It's a real honor to be here today. Actually, I'm humbled. My name is Ken Hamik. I'm the futurist, the local futurist that's been living amongst you for about the past 10 years. And this is kind of my homework assignment to all of you coming out of COVID and looking at the future. I'm trying to determine how the best path forward is. And I want to share you some of the thoughts that I've had over the past 10 years and share them with you. So the title of my presentation today is called 2 for 20. It's a regenerative future for the North Coast. 2 for 20 really is important because I think if you have a sense of urgency, and I definitely think today in this world of uncertainty, we are in a sense of urgency, that we have also confidence in how we move forward. So I'm saying let's look long, let's fish far out, 20 years, let's say, and then pull the lines back and say, what can we do over the next 2 years that could best prepare us for almost any future we might be able to face? And that's the proposition today. So this is kind of an agenda I'm going to work with you. It's a book we'll write together if you wish. Over the past 10 years, these are some of the insights that I've learned. So I bring a new approach. As I talked about as a futurist, I think about things and how they're connected. In fact, if you met me in the early days when my daughter was coming up to Humboldt State University in 2011, I probably handed you a card that said, finding the patterns that connect. And so what that means for me as a young futurist is how the world was connecting, and I didn't think it was doing it real well. We were moving into another uncertain future back in the early 90s. And we thought the science was telling us that we needed to change course on how we conducted commerce and industry. So we proposed some changes, zero waste, reuse, recycle. You might have heard a few of these things now, but we tried to make it a corporate agenda. Back in 1992, we even had a big meeting. We invited many corporations, very famous corporations, to join us at Biosphere 2 in Arizona, where they reconstructed the earth literally under domes as a practice, and to say, well, how could we develop all these amazing ecosystems we have maybe on another planet? So I'm involved with that kind of group, trying to think about how things are all connected. So toward that end, I met Bucky Fuller, and I think the lesson that he taught me from 1992 is people never leave a sinking ship until they see the lights of another ship approaching. So I met Bucky when I was a young futurist in 1980 in Washington, D.C., and he was having them put buckets of colored chips along his huge Dymaxion map they laid out on this huge arena floor. And he was shuffling those chips around just to show how interconnected we are. Trade, commerce, telecommunications, even water and food. So we really, going back, I learned a lot about how things are connected. But I also learned you need to be careful when you're moving forward too quick. People just get used to their habits. So where are we going from here? What kind of book are we writing? So this is maybe, let's call it chapter 1. It's not a blueprint at all. It's not going to have a lot of numbers and data in here, even though I have a lot of that to back this up. But it's more of a conversation that I want to start with all of you throughout the region. So this is more of a guide. And it's not a guide from me or from any organization. This is a collective future that we're trying to talk about. Tribes are having their conversations, counties are having their conversations, the cities, rural areas are concerned about a number of things in our coastal area. But I think that all of us would agree that we have an element of quality of life that we say are housing, energy, food, water, broadband. If we are doing well by these measures, then we're probably going to be successful as an economy moving forward. So I'm going to throw out Hempcrete. Housing is the first option. It's a project that I've been working on a lot. Before I get that, I just want to show you this graphic that kind of shows how all these are connected. I believe that water, energy, food, housing, and broadband, if they're not connected through community, if we're not having a conversation together, they'll fall down. They'll suffer, they'll be weak, they'll be compromised. So I believe that if we do this with eyes wide open together, I think that there's a lot of opportunities for us. And I think there's a lot of security in our futures over the next 20 years. So the first one I would talk about is housing. Housing is important. As I mentioned, Hempcrete is one of the alternative building materials that's being used. In other parts of the world, you're going to be hearing about. Housing is probably our biggest challenge. As a futurist and talking with all of you in many different capacities, you've told me all pretty much the same thing. We're concerned about a lot of things, but housing is really the infrastructure that we're weakest on, given the growth that's upon us. So Hempcrete is a new technology that's really not at all. Most of our clothes and paper and everything were made from hemp in the early eras of our country. But Europe, France in particular, looked away from some of the carbon producing industries, and especially in the construction industry, and they went toward an approach called Hempcrete. Hempcrete's a very old practice, but it's made new by the technology and the IP that the French have put into it. So they basically have given us, they've allowed us to adopt this technology and bring it to Humboldt County. And how they're doing this, it's an indigenous project, by the way. This Lisa Sundberg, my partner out of Trinidad, is called Indigenous Habitat Institute. Off to the right, that's Clara and the blonde hair, Terry, Lisa's son. And they're working on a hempcrete house in Europe there. Lisa just returned from her second trip to France to deepen our partnership with the French and the Swedish partner, Peter Homdahl, that we're also working with. And so we're practicing this. We're learning how they're doing it. Lisa on the left is in front of really a high demand, high premium priced products in the world markets, textile markets. That's long hemp fiber. So part of the hemp growing process, when you break it down, part of it will go into mixed with lime, and that's going into the houses that you're seeing on the right. And on the left, there's leftover fiber we can also yield for our local artists to give them a cheaper feed supply for really an amazing textile that is in high demand in the market. We're in weekly calls with our European partners on bringing Hempcrete technology and IP to the area. On the left is a call with Peter Homdahl, our Swedish colleague from House of Hemp, North America, and some of the buildings they're throwing up in Europe, the Hempcrete buildings, are Sorel Place-like, the new 4-story project that went up by Danco in Arcata recently. But these are carbon negative projects. The one on the right is a Norwegian architect that we've been working with and playing with some designs. So there's a lot of the global community that's coming around to this alternative, regenerative, sustainable technology because it's 70% energy efficient just by the nature of the material, the properties of the material. This is the EU tests where they've approved this as a building material already, European Union. But they've also, the quality that a lot of people here are really going to be interested in is it's fireproof. We're test burning one of these in Canada at about 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit on one side, and you can put your cheek on the other side and not even feel warm. So these are really going to bring insurance costs down. There's a spray technology when you use in the interim to even make fire retardant and energy efficient. Some of the existing housing and buildings we have. But since building and housing is really going to be one of the biggest needs that we'll have as a futurist, my biggest regret would be that if the next 20 years we build the way we have, which is carbon intensive, and it's going to put even more bad stuff into the atmosphere. When we have a technology really literally in our hands where we can own our own workforce, we're training our own people from the tribes to maybe College of the Redwoods doing the curriculum, Cal Poly Humboldt doing the R&D and product development, all the different organizations, Danco, Chris Dart, the president of Danco, met with Lisa and I to talk about the project, and he kindly signed a letter of support saying he sees a really great future in Hempcrete. We just got some recent news that the US standards are being lined up with the European tests that have already been done. So we're getting close to being able to do this here. So if we're building our own Hempcrete housing and building with our own supply, with our own workforce, and with our own manufacturing technology, supply chains can break down and we're still good. We can still build the future we want. We're basically shielded from a lot of those forces that are kind of unraveling outside of our area. So energy is another big one, of course, we all have to pay attention to. I think I've got some better news there. We have a core hub project that I was asked to participate in. Humboldt Area Foundation did this wonderful community conversation where the tribes and all the different entities and individuals were invited to talk about how we want to receive this offshore wind power that is the envy of a lot of people around the country because they don't have the best wind that we do here. In fact, we even had the Secretary of the Interior for the United States, who's indigenous, come to visit our area just recently and say, please develop that offshore wind. So they're giving us an opportunity to do it. We're taking it. With solar, I think, and some of the microgrid projects that Jana is putting out, for example, Jana Gagnon, who's one of our local brain trusts here in Blue Lake, Rancheria in Humboldt County, has an off-grid energy system that was replicated at the airport here in Humboldt too. So there's a lot of lessons we can learn from just the projects we're building here locally. But I think the energy we're doing pretty good with. The food hub, because food is really vital to all of us, I believe is also really strong. It's getting stronger anyway. I'm really working closely with the North Coast Growers Association. These are the group that put on the farmers markets, but have really the farmer connections with that community. And so we look at this future, we see the pieces that are missing, and we call it a food hub, and we say, if supply chains break down, what are those parts of our food economy we need to build up before that happens? And so we're looking at maybe the grain economy and different pieces that we can support and shore up. But I would also argue, while we're doing this important work for our security over the next 20 years, we also are changing the nature of how we advertise our ag and promote it, but also how we're learning from each other. So regenerative agriculture is a thing you're going to be hearing more about. There's a new documentary that's called Tending the Garden from our area that I'm proud to say is going to be released here, I believe, by the end of this year. So there's new thinking about how we're doing food on the North Coast that I think is really important part of our conversation. Water, of course, to everyone is important. I think it's a bigger concern outside of our area. We definitely have concerns with water, but I believe that we have an opportunity to do things collaboratively. Clear Lake definitely is a resource for the southern part of our region. There's some issues there that I know Clear Lake community is working on. Ruth Lake up here, north, I believe that there's some contract rights we really need to get in front of, and probably as a community try to figure out how to what those usages are going to be so we don't lose those rights in the future. But I believe the regenerative ag that I just mentioned, it also plays a role because it holds more organic matter in the soil. There's less runoff. we would actually need less water for some of the farms if we do some of these new practices that we're talking about. Connie Stewart and others have done a great job in trying to build up our broadband for the region. AEDC has done a great role in helping support. But this is also a rural area on the North Coast. So we know that as virtual reality and augmented reality, telemedicine implementation, where we can receive doctors' advice and maybe even some tools remotely. These are going to be important for our future too. And so I think the rural areas need the most, but we have some new fiber coming in across the Pacific, joining our community from, I think, Singapore, Taiwan, and Japan. We've got the project coming in from 299. I believe that we're really doing a lot better. And as we hook all those resources together, we'll be in good shape. The thing that holds us all together is community. And I think that that's really important for us to remember. I'm going to repeat it again many times before I end this presentation, because if we do have all of these pieces together and look at them separately, we're missing opportunities, because I realize that every time I do a scenario session with a community, there's insights that are missed if we don't look at how things are connected. So if we're talking about water, all of a sudden something from wind is going to come up. There's a guy that I work with closely at Cal Poly Humboldt a lot, and that's Lonnie Grafman. And Lonnie Grafman is the author of some of the books, To Catch the Sun, To Catch the Rain. And these are appropriate technology projects. These don't need large capital investments, but that kind of thinking is also regenerative, because it means you don't necessarily have to go for the big dollars every time. Sometimes there's some community collaborations or partnerships that can happen that can yield much bigger results. So as we write this book, I'm on to my next chapter, and this is probably the most important one for me. As I've been talking with all of you, I've been paying more attention to the next generations, the folks that are younger than I am. I've always learned from them. They're my R&D, because they're the future. They're the leaders of the future. I would argue that at 35 years old, you can actually be president of the United States legally. So that's a pretty good age to say, let's start that conversation maybe in a bigger way. I know there's a lot of emerging leader projects going on throughout the region, and a lot of leadership training that happens. But this is an opportunity for us to get the younger cohorts together with the data that we'll provide them. They can interview us and consult with us, but they're the ones that really construct the 4 scenarios of our region. And the scenarios that I talk about are very similar to this graphic that I was showing you and talking about all of the key elements that we really need to manage systemically. Irie Cook is one of the Cal Poly Humboldt students, a new guy, and I asked him to help animate some of the presentation for me today in this way. This is actually a self-illustration of him. And I asked him to do a fishing metaphor, because that's kind of what we're doing when we do scenarios. We throw the fishing line out 20 years and we reel it back. We'll see what kind of technology and energy and demographics and economics we come up with. But we throw another line out, different part of the water, we're going to come up with different types of futures, and another one and another one. So the fishing analogy is really purposeful. It means that these younger cohorts, when they do the scenarios, they're going to take all the information we give them, but they're going to try to say, what might this look like as a movie moving forward? And then what kind of resources do we have in 2022 for that movie? Because the next point I make is where we start and where we end. What's keeping us awake at night? It's really as simple as that. But it's a question we always forget to ask when we look at data. How does it affect me and my company and my community? So to me, as a futurist, we put that front and forward. We say, what are we concerned about? And so those scenarios are not about somebody else. They're about us. They may be outside events, outside trends that are going to impact us that we don't have very much control over, but we have control over our own destiny. So what I'm suggesting is we role play and we fish those, those 4 different fishing trips we take together. We're going to find out we don't have to be the victims of our own circumstances. We've been in extractive economies up here for a number of years, and we've seen this play before, the boom bust cycles that have happened. So I really believe that this is an opportunity for us to break out of that. This is an opportunity for us to use the brain trust that we have in this region, and to get together and marry all of those talents and those resources, to talk about how we can diversify, how we can move maybe in a more regenerative and local, regional direction, how we can find through these scenarios a common language. This is really important because sometimes we talk at each other, and sometimes I'm throwing a number out and somebody doesn't even understand where the number came from or what it means. So we have to figure out how to create the same language together. And as we live through these movies, through the scenarios, that helps us develop that language. I believe another component of our success is going to be finding as many voices and hands to lay onto this project as possible. It means that we really need all voices. It can be through an interview, it could be through surveys, community meetings, but basically we want to gather some of that information so that we have that as part of the information we can work with when we do the scenarios. This is really a transformational moment in history, not just for us on the North Coast, but really for the rest of the world. As a futurist, I'll tell you, it's depressing looking back in 1992 and thinking about how I think we called it right. We had some really good advice. The advice was not taken. And so COVID happened. I really have changed my attitude. I'm the most optimistic futurist you'll find on Earth because I'm living in the North Coast. I believe that we have a unique opportunity here because of not a big population and not too much infrastructure. We have just enough, but not too much, to be able to steer the ship in a different direction, to create that new vision, to disembark from the ship that we're on and get to the next one. So one of the things that I'm really proud to say, Humboldt was identified by this famous futurist named Peter Senge. Peter Senge is being brought to Humboldt next month to work with our students. Colby Smart from Humboldt County Office of Education, I think, is probably one of the biggest reasons why this international project is coming to us. But Peter Senge, this famous business futurist out of MIT, who started with a book in 1990 called The Fifth Discipline. And the fifth discipline was just basically how to do systems thinking. CEOs from businesses. It was one of the first futurist books that we put out with my young group in the Bay Area. But CEOs throughout all industries really took to the book and the thinking, and they sent their executives and they started to learn about it. And they found it was very successful in their strategic thinking competitively. So Peter was finding that as he moved through these practices and there's more of this work, and it became part of the natural curriculum of universities even, there was something missing. And that was the compassion piece. Yeah, we do business and we want profit and we want to do good for our families and our economies, but there's something more. And so he's infusing a new thinking into this systems thinking that includes the economy and water and food and all the security things that we talked about before, but how do we do it compassionately? So he's going to train us, our community, to how they're doing that. And they're going to actually work with us in an interplay with other international communities as well. Talk about the younger generation as well, as they are the prosumers that are doing this better than almost anybody else. So the younger generations grew up with technology as a first language. I did not. I had a black and white TV for my first computer monitor. So that means that they know the 24/7 media. They really also want to get involved with how they receive and consume. They're very interactive with everything they do, not just video games. So younger generations have told me they like to create what they consume. And that's called a prosumer. It's an old Alvin Toffler term from way back. But the prosumer basically means that I'm not just consuming something, I'm also producing it. Clothing is an easy way to visualize this. When you see your sons or daughters, or a lot of the folks amongst us, maybe even listening today, you don't want to just buy a garment. You want to put your brand on it. You want to, make it yours. In fact, a lot of the designers are actually catering to this and saying, yeah, help us create your own design and your own look. So I believe that it should be involved with technology and some of these regenerative ag practices, other things I'm talking about too, seeing ourselves as part of the product stream, getting involved with it more deeply. We have 3D printing that's coming to us now. It's in the high schools. So we literally able to do things not by a corporation, but just ourselves, using like some of the thinking that Lonnie Grafman has done at Cal Poly. What are some of those alternative technologies we can pursue? I want to talk a little bit about how we're building the pipeline into this younger community at one of the hats that I've worn, which is at the Arcata Chamber of Commerce. During COVID, I had the opportunity to serve as chair of the Arcata Chamber Board of Directors. And during COVID, we did scenarios like I just was suggesting to you. And so we got outside, not over Zoom, and we socially distanced, but we were able to have this conversation about our fishing trips. And so we did 4 scenarios. And like I said, it's what keeps you awake at night. So we came back to 2022 and we said, so what does this mean? What strategies can we do now to make a difference for our community? And one of the most important ones was number 1 there, to build a workforce development pipeline with local schools. So Cocatat was the model company we started with, but we also moved to Arcata High and we just asked the seniors and the teachers, would you like us to introduce you to CR and College of Redwoods and the new Cal Poly Humboldt and some of the local businesses and industries in the area? They said yes. So it was a very successful project. That's now migrated as a model to McKinleyville Chamber of Commerce. And it sounds like Eureka is going to get engaged as well. So involving these younger voices as our successors too, but involve them at younger ages into the big strategic issues that we're facing, I believe is really going to be best for all of us. They see around corners that we can't see around a lot of times in the older generations. Because of the technology and the media that they consume, they can process things very uniquely. So I would go back for a second to say, this is what got me started on all this. When I was a young futurist joining Global Business Network in 1989, there was an anthropologist that was working on a project with us called the Global Teenager. And I believe that this is really the first recognition that this demographic was going to be a force. And the question at the time in 1989-90 was, how connected were they really? It turns out they really were. Madonna and Michael Jackson in the 1980s were in remote parts of Egypt and China as much as they were in the Bronx and LA. So we really are connected. And I think that those connections also will inform our future. So chapter 3 of our book, I want to remind us that this isn't just my conversation with you today. With me are a lot of conversations that I've had with really amazing people and amazing organizations. And I'm just going to summarize these just in brief here. So as I mentioned, HCOE has been doing some really excellent cutting edge work on systems thinking. This Peter Senge project that they're bringing in October, I think that's going to be really something that we'll draw from for many years out. I think it's a 3-year project. Humboldt Area Foundation took a lead role recently in this core hub project. And I think that projects like this are really important because as the communities, not just one community or one organization or one company, they brought us all together, the tribes, the organizations, the individuals, the artists, everyone, to say we all are going to be impacted and the beneficiaries of this offshore wind project. So let's figure out how we want to receive those monies and distribute them throughout the community, and part of that, control our own destiny. I'm also on the board of directors at Humboldt County Visitors Bureau, where I point out we're tending more toward the regenerative tourism conversations. We're trying to figure out how to build up our assets, the farms and other conversations we have with tourists that we're inviting into our region. So I believe that Mendocino Lake, Humboldt, Del Norte, we have these beautiful properties. But I believe that the tourists, I hope, will come to visit us to learn too. As we build these regenerative models, maybe a Hempcrete house, a Hempcrete project, maybe at College of the Redwoods, the students that are living in 1960s housing, and they rebuild carbon negative, high-rise student housing that they built themselves from a regenerative material. Maybe tourists will want to come and maybe bring their future students here to see the projects we're doing, the farms we're working, to learn from us. And we could learn from them and their projects they bring. So we elevate the conversation. Cal Poly Humboldt, College of the Redwoods, had a podcast here about 1.5 years ago with the two presidents. I really love that Tom Jackson and Keith Flamer are working very closely together because I think those and all of the universities across our 4 counties, we really have to figure out a way of making sure that the workforce is connected and we're getting all the skill sets captured in the future workforce needs. And these are the institutions that are best equipped to do it. As I mentioned before, I'm also honored to be working with Indigenous Habitat Institute and House of Hemp North America on this Hempcrete project. We're hoping to bring that as well in as a supply of fiber to help our artist community to build to make new clothes for export even. There's a lot of opportunities here, but the best part is we get to own all of the means of manufacture, supply, and we have our own skilled workforce so that we don't have to depend on supply chains breaking down in our building future. A few other ones, Humboldt Green, we've done a number of events. There's more coming up, but very much environmentally focused. California Adventure District is a relatively new organization that's across 12 counties above Sacramento and the Bay Area, and saying we have more in common in the nation's playground up here, maybe really the lungs of North America, which I think we should be calling ourselves more and more. So Nigel Skeet's been doing some really work over there on that website. You can go consult and look at. We just started a group recently to lift up the voice, to make sense of the cannabis markets a little better. So I'm a founding board member of the Redwood Cannabis Retailer Alliance. That's hoping to bring some business solutions to a market that needs to have more sense brought to it. Also, about 7 years ago, one of the founders of Community Pride and Peace, it's a nonprofit that was here to do a lot of the things that we're talking about here today. Just picking up some trash makes a difference in the community, helping feed somebody, helping looking for resources for somebody that doesn't have a home. These are all really important things, and they should be a part of our systems thinking. Nordic Aqua Farms, there's other big projects that are coming here that are causing us to rethink even the scale of who we are. And so I think that that's also part of the systems thinking as we grow and we try to manage that growth. How big do we want to grow? Where do we want to grow? As a community, we should be talking about these together. Also, I want to mention, as I serve on the Arcata Chamber, but I also collaborate as much as I can with all the other chambers throughout the region, really, even Chico. I think Eva was in some of these conversations because I think that the larger region, we can learn from each other if we talk and communicate with each other. If we're siloed, it's silence. The ink people I mentioned specifically because Libby Maynard, who just recently retired after over 40 years at the helm, represents a lot of the artists in our community. And I argue that as AI and robotics take over a number of our jobs in the future, one of the things that we're left with is our own creativity and how we express ourselves and our own aesthetics. So I believe the ink people really plays a huge role in these conversations we're having. Also, Patsy's Place of Humboldt, even my home in McKinleyville, Humboldt. We've using this as an opportunity to talk to CEO friends of mine that are visiting the area. They're curious about some of the work that I've been doing out here and wondering maybe Humboldt's in their future. So trying to grow conversations to say, maybe if you haven't thought about Humboldt and Del Norte and Mendocino and Lake, this is you should put us on the top of your list next time you're looking at economic development opportunities. So looking at this list and all these people, some of which are missing here, what I want to relay is all these are dots that I'm trying to connect, that we should be connecting together. Really important to have shared leadership. I believe our future is only going to be successful through shared leadership. So the fourth chapter, which means there's many more to come, is I wanted to express to all of you today a sense of urgency. I don't mean fear, but I mean, we really, Will Rogers once said, you may be on the right track, but you're going to get run over if you just sit there. So I believe we are on the right track. I believe the new Cal Poly announcements bring in some new engineering and science resources to our back door that we're going to be able to utilize. I believe our farming community is incredibly, we've got an incredible opportunity through regenerative agriculture to be able to promote those and to actually model those out for other communities that will want to do similar types of agriculture to preserve water and topsoil. So I think that there's a real sense of we have a lot of the resources we need right now, but community is going to be the key. If we look at water and energy and broadband and housing, our food, all these things, the healthcare, this really needs to be addressed so much in our remote areas. Community is the thing that's going to help us make the right decisions. That shared leadership is going to help us figure out the best way to allocate the resources. And if we do it over the next 2 years, it's going to be a lot easier to do it if supply chains are breaking down and we don't have the resources and we're a little bit occupied by just trying to save pieces of our economy in some unfortunate futures we may face. So I'm trying to help us make sure that we have the security and we don't have to go through that type of boom bust pain that maybe we have in the past. The other thing I want to remind us all in this conversations with the younger cohorts that I work with, they are looking for meaningful work. The graduates from our schools, the workers in our community, the people that serve us, they are getting frustrated. I think they're seeing the world in crisis and they want to do something about it. So I believe that some of these 2-year commitments that I'm proposing across all these areas, these are all pieces of our future that I think all of us would agree are going to help us all out. And what's more meaningful than helping your community, building a house that's sustainable, or helping on a farm that's creating a new regenerative model? I believe these are, this is a big piece of what's going to make this all work. We're talking about sponsors. I would love to have many sponsors for these regional scenarios so that it's not really owned by anyone. It's owned by all of us, but there will have to be some budget involved. I would love to have more of these conversations with anyone in the counties or anyone else listening to this conversation today. I can be contacted at kenhamik@gmail.com. And one of my favorite people, Mark Twain, that says it all. And I don't think this says it 2022 better than anything. And that is, apparently there's nothing that cannot happen today. because it all seems to be happening all at once. Thank you for inviting me in and lending my voice into this amazing group of people. And I look forward to all of your conversations. And I look forward to helping write this book with you if you let me. And thank you so much for Susan Seaman in particular for this invite today. It was a real honor. And thank you. You have a great day.